It was 30 years ago. This Sunday was April 19th, 30 years ago. Kind of the latest time for Resurrection Sunday. And we met in the Movies West Theater on Avenue L and 27th Street West. And when we did that, actually we had 18 in our core group, but that included some kids, our 2 kids, Brian and Laura's 2 kids, and the Cook family. I think they had 3 boys. So we had about equal number of adults and kids, and so the 18 of us we came out in January to launch the church in April, and in the meantime, I was building homes, and so during the week I would frame up homes. And then we would do Bible studies in the evening and get ready we sent out 24,000 hand-addressed envelopes with letters inviting people to come to a new church. And so our goal was to have 100 new people on that very first Sunday. We were with new churches across the United States at that time. Their goal was to have 100 new churches on that Sunday. Start with 100 people coming for the first time so that 10,000 new people would be reached on that Sunday. We had 18 in our core group. We had 44 people from other churches that helped us get that started that first Sunday. Because we had no, where do you get Sunday school teachers? And where do you get nursery workers? And where do you get ushers? So we put together people to help us in that capacity. So we had the 44 and the 18, and then we had exactly 100 new people that came that Sunday. So that was really amazing. And then, I don't know if you're aware of it or not, but if churches retain 16%, they have to retain 16% to just stay even from year to year. Because people die, people move away, and they have to keep 16%. If you retain more than that, you're doing really well. And so the next Sunday, we had 62 people, to launch the church out from that very first Sunday. So it was just really the Lord, working in such a wonderful way. So I'll just throw that out and say thank you, for being a part of that, and for us having that joy of being here as the pastor for 30 years. I don't know about you, but there are times in my life where I don't know if I want to be cautious how I say this, okay? All of you are important, okay? But I don't know if I have met anybody that's a president or a senator or, some big celebrity. Any of you had encounters with really important people? No, 1 or 2 of you. But most of us, we're just kind of ordinary, and not presidents or kings or stuff like that. Encounters. Do you know this guy? I'm not a Amazing Race fan. My bride enjoys that, so I watch that. I might be working on my computer and it's going, but I'm there with her. The guy's named Phil, and they've been, I want to say 17 years, but I don't know if it's 17 seasons or 17 years, I don't know which. But it's been around for quite some time now. And as a matter of fact, I didn't say this in the last service, but I was the president of a camp in New York for years called the Boys Gym Club, which trains boys across the United States and Canada, and actually some parts of Mexico and other countries. And those boys come to that camp for absolutely free. And so I was on the board for 25 years and the president for 10 years. And one of those boys actually won the Amazing Race back. But it's just kind of an interesting little thing. This guy also does bicycling, and he does it, it's called Le Ride, RIDE, and it's for to raise money for MS. So here's what happens. He was going to be on a bike ride, and it was going to go through Indiana. I have a buddy that's a pastor in Dyer, Indiana, and D-Y-E-R, Dyer, Indiana. And he's been here and preached a couple of times. And his wife really likes this program. And she heard that Phil was going to come through town. And so she decided, she said to her husband, hey, I want to go out and I'm going to wait, on the side of the road, and I'm going to have a sign, that say I'm a fan of Amazing Grace and saying hi to him. He says, okay, go ahead, So she takes her van and she goes out. But the morning that they're coming through town, it's raining cats and dogs.
You never heard that?
He's listening. That's always a good thing for pastors to know that kids are listening. I said, it's raining cats and dogs. And that means it's really a lot of rain coming down. Kind of an old people's term, isn't it? So, Pastor Mark says, don't look at him. So it's raining. Really hard. Almost like Noah's time. And she's out there with a sign. And the bicycles are going by, and Phil comes by. And it's raining so hard, he stops. He sees here's a Amazing Grace fan, and he stops and he says, it's raining like crazy. Can I sit in your vehicle? And she goes, wait until I tell my husband. They get in the car and she's thinking, well, here's what she looks like. Because it's rained cats and dogs, She's soaked. And he's in the car with her and he says, you got anything to eat? We talk about encounters. Wait till I tell my husband. Matter of fact, Pastor Matteson can use this someday. She said all I had was an old dried up sandwich, and I thought, oh no, I gotta give him this. I said, oh, I got this dried up pastrami or whatever it was. And he ate it, and then they took a picture. And then he was on his way, and she said to her husband, you'll never believe what happened to me today. And we talk about encounters like that. Kind of wonderful encounters. Or, have you heard of this guy? His name really isn't Roho, but that's what he goes by. Roho Hartman. And in June of 2015, he had an encounter that he went back home to listen to him. He had an encounter with a famous country and western singer called Blake Shelton. And here's what he says.
I didn't get a chance to get Blake's number. I give him one of my cards, though. I did do that.
Roho was headed home from Ardmore when he reached a river that was once a road.
There's a car on the other side pulled up. Here he went in it. And I thought, well, I believe I make it, too.
He didn't make it. Soon he and another passerby were pushing his stalled truck up a hill.
They said, don't slip down. And I said, I'm not. And it was a slow move to start with, but we stayed with it.
That is, until a Dodge pulled up with a handy tow rope and a familiar face.
And the guy said, are you ready? And that looks like Black Shelton. That's exactly what I thought.
What do you tell your family after that? This is one Southern boy, isn't it? That looks like Blake Shelton. I knew that. I thought he made it through, so I can do it too. So here he is, ready, and now he's going to be pulled out. You ready? Yeah. And he's going to be pulled out, and then he has the audacity to ask for a ride home. Here's what he says.
And I said, yeah, I'm ready.
Soon the truck was safe up the hill, but Roho was far from home.
And I said, hey, could you give me a ride home? And he said, where you live? And I said, just right over yonder.
And this unlikely
My wife called me. I said, Blake Shelton pulled me out, and he's going to go ahead and bring me on home. I said, you better slick up, and we'll be there in just a minute.
That's an encounter. Can you imagine his wife calls him and says, "Did you get out?" Yeah, Blake Shelton. Blake Shelton did it, you know? Blake Shelton, of course, she knows who he is, and he says, yeah, and he's bringing me home. My wife would kill me if I did. You did what? Why didn't you tell me? I invited him to stay for lunch, too. Encounters. We know what encounters are like. You know, we almost think of them in terms of bad things at times. We said, I was out hiking in the woods and I had an encounter with a bear. Yeah, usually it's kind of a bad thing, but these are, unusual encounters. I want you to understand that when it came to the tomb and the resurrection, there were some encounters that were going to take place, that were going to change a whole lot. Let me even say it this way. As you read the end of the Gospel of John, there are 4 encounters that people had when it came to an empty tomb. It wasn't like it was just going to happen. This was going to be an encounter. And let me just give you, there was Peter and John. This is John chapter 20. And so all of John chapter 20 have to deal with these encounters. Peter and John in verses 1 through 10. Then Mary Magdalene in verses 11 to 18. And then the disciples. And then one of the disciples at that point was Thomas, who had a kind of a special encounter. So let's look first of all at Peter and John and their encounter, because what I want you to see, I just told you earlier, we started the church 30 years ago. On that Sunday, I did something, and I mentioned it once before, but on that Sunday, we started for the very first time this kind of greeting time in our service. I came from a church in Indiana where the deacons especially didn't want, as you come to church, it's always kind of just, you're quiet and you want to be reverent. This is the place where we worship God. But it's not a place, it's not a funeral. And so they kind of had the concept that before the church service, you just come in and don't say anything to anybody. And you just, speak to God, and you just sit down and you don't really see anybody else. So you speak to God, and then during the service, God speaks to you, and then after the service, then you can speak to each other. But the whole idea is we're here as a family, the family of God. And when's the last time you arrived at home and nobody said anything? You get together and you fellowship and you share. So, when those kind of experiences come, we want you to have encounters that are really going to be kind of a God thing. So here's what it said of Peter and John. The first day of the week, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb early. Interesting to me that women are the ones that came to the tomb early here, not the men. Mary Magdalene comes to the tomb early while it was still dark. Again, doesn't that strike you as unusual? That women, do you want to go out when it's dark? And do you go to a cemetery when it's dark? She saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. So she ran to Simon Peter and to the other disciple. So now he's going to link these two people up. And the text even says there, the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, which was John. And so you have Peter and John. And what's even more striking to me is this. Peter had just denied the Lord. But when there's a problem, who does she decide she's going to go see? Peter. And he hasn't even been restored yet. That comes up in chapter 21. That comes up later. And he says, Peter, do you love me? Oh, you know I love you. Well, then, and Peter denies 3 times, but she still goes to see him. Another thing that's striking to me about this is she ran to Simon Peter and the other disciple. how did she even know they'd be together? Unless they lived in the same place, or they were right side by side or relatively close. She gets there. She says to them, they've taken the Lord out of the tomb, and oh, catch this. We'll talk about it in a little bit, but the women showed up. All four of the Gospels talk about women showing up. John's the only one that talks about Mary showing up. But what does she say here? They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we, catch that, let that sink in for a second. We don't know where they laid him, because later when we talk about the other women, I want you to be reminded that she is saying we, me, and the other women don't know where they laid him. Got it? We don't know where they put him. And at that, Peter and the other disciple went out, heading for the tomb. The two were running together. But the other disciple outran Peter, got to the tomb first. By the way, the writer of this book is the one that outran him and didn't want to mention his name. He could have said, by the way, polishes, I outran him. I don't know if Peter was the old guy or John was just better fit, but John outran and got to the tomb first. Stooping down. They're at the tomb now. You often have to wonder at this point, where were the guards? At this point. Why didn't they say, hey, what are you doing? Hey, why is the stone rolled away? The guards were put there so that nobody could steal the body, but of course, the body's gone now. So stooping down, he saw the linen cloths lying there, yet he did not go in. Then following him, Simon Peter came also. He entered the tomb and saw the linen cloths lying there. The wrapping that had been on his head was lying with the linen cloths and was folded up in a separate place by itself. The other disciple who had reached the tomb first, the guy writing here, the other disciple who reached the tomb first then entered the tomb, saw, and believed. Look at this for a moment. 3 times, what do you see? They saw, and they saw, and they kept seeing. What's interesting about this is the Greek language has 6 Greek words that can be translated to see or saw. What you see on the screen here is 3 different Greek words that are translated. And if you knew the nuances of those, you'd say, that's why they had this encounter. That's why things changed. So let's put these words on the screen. The first one is blepo. The second one is thereo. And the third one is aiden. Let me slide them over here, because all of them are translated saw. But I'll slide them over here, and let me tell you about these words and what happened. The first word, we get an English word, almost letter for letter, right out of the Greek. The Greek letter beta is first. Beta sounds like our letter what? B. The next letter is lambda, and that's our letter L. Then we replace the epsilon with an I here. And then the next letter is the Greek letter pi, in pi r squared. So, what do we have there? It's just a blip. Now, how does that get used? We have some people in our congregation that are air traffic controllers. When they sit, and you've seen it in movies, I've never been in an air traffic controller's room, but you've seen it in movies where they're sitting and you've got the screen and the radar is sweeping around in a circle, and where the planes are, you just see a little what? Just a blip. Just, not long, not something to study. You look at it and It's just a blip, and you say, okay, no, these two planes are getting close. There are a couple of blips there. And what does this Greek word mean? It means to glance. And so it's just a blip. So here's what happens. John comes to the grave side. He gets there first, and he does not go in. But he does glance what? He glanced. Didn't change his life. Just, wow. Mary Magdalene said they'd taken the Lord's body, and we don't know where they put it. Huh. And just does a glance. Again, no encounter that changed his life at that point. Peter then arrives, and he said, Therao. He looks in. This Greek word, we have an English word that comes letter for letter from that. The theta is a th. The epsilon is our e. The omega, the last Greek letter, is our letter O. Omega. You expect it to be O, right? And then the rho, that looks like a P in English there, is the rho. And that's the letter R. So we have the word theory. That letter for letter comes from that, and we just put the Y on it. And so what do? You ever have somebody where a murders take place, a murder has taken place, and some investigators come and put together different what? Theories. And so when they are going to put together a theory on this, they look at the evidence, they investigate the evidence that's there and put together a theory of what happened. What's interesting to me is, well, I'll put it right here, it means to examine or to investigate. And so that's what Peter did. He didn't just take a blip. He didn't just lean over and go, he glanced. Wow, what's that mean? Hadn't made a conclusion at that point, hadn't made any life-changing decisions at that point. By then, Peter arrives, probably sucking air. But he does what Peter does best. Bueno, I'm going in. And he goes right in the tomb. And what does he do? Therao. He's examining. He's investigating. What's interesting, and just as a side note, I want you to understand, theories are just that, theories. Once they have been proven, they move from a theory to a what? I'll call fact. Or we say, in science, it moves, like if I let go of this, every time I let go of it, it's going to do what? Because of the what of gravity? The law of gravity, not the theory of gravity. Because anything is only a theory if you cannot continue to prove it again and again and again and again. And it is the same thing every time. Every time I let go, so we can move it from a theory to a law. That's why in our society it's so perplexing to me why unbelievers wanted to cram down the throats of people the idea of evolution. What is it called? They will use this word. It's the theory of evolution, which means what? It's a theory, not the law. But they want to teach it like the what? There is no God. Because if they can push this down somebody's throat enough, then there's no God. Because we just evolved and we're there. So he says, look, Peter looked in and he starts to pick it apart and examine what's going on here. The last word, Aiden, doesn't have an English word that we use, but it means to perceive with understanding. So now you have all three of them being translated saw. They saw. They saw. But one just glanced. One really studied it. and one perceived with understanding and had an encounter like never before. And so here's what you have. The other disciple who reached the tomb first, then entered the tomb, saw, and what happened? Believed. Now Jesus said, that's okay. I'm willing to show you some evidence, but blessed are they who have not seen yet believed. Because if you need to see something, that's not much by faith. And he said, the just shall live by what? Faith. And faith is believing what you can't see, but you know it's certain in your heart. So when it comes to this John's Gospel in chapter 20, I want you to see 4 encounters. There was Peter and John, and then there was Mary Magdalene. So let's go back here for a second. There are 4 Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Those are the 4 books of the entire books of the Bible that talk about the life of Christ. We call them the Gospels because gospel means good news, and so they're the good news about Christ. All 4 of these mention about the women being at this empty tomb. But what I want you to see is in Matthew 28, by the way, all of these, except John, are the last chapters of those books. So it's easy to kind of know what's going on here if you open up the New Testament Gospels and say, oh, what chapter do you think that was in? Well, it's probably going to be in the last chapter. John has another chapter that's yet there. But in chapter 28 of Matthew, it mentions Mary Magdalene and Mary, and it doesn't call her Jesus' mother at that point. It says the mother of James, who was the half-brother of our Lord, who ended up writing the book of James in the New Testament. When you get to Mark, Matthew, Mark, and Luke all include Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Jesus. However, Mark adds Salome, but not Joanna, and Luke includes Joanna, but not Salome. And just so you know, John only mentions Mary Magdalene. Now what happens is people that open up the Word of God, people that don't believe in the Word of God, start open up that and they go, see, look, there are problems in the Bible here because, look, one mentions this and one mentions that, and so we got a problem. I'm just amazed that they always look for the problem rather than saying, how do we function as people?
Yeah.
You know, we had 4 different writers of this book, and so these 4 people start to respond to things in different ways. For instance, when we go home on a Sunday, once in a while I'll say to my wife, hey, I didn't see so-and-so there today. Oh yeah, they were there, and I talked to them about this. Oh, that's good. Oh, you know, I just didn't know whether are they out of town or what's going on. And so we don't make a list of absolute everybody. It's not like we take attendance. We don't know who's here and who's not. And when they started to change the lights in the auditorium here, I said, there were times I was up here preaching and the lights were bright here, so I couldn't really see your eyes. I said, could you bring up the lights a little bit in the house so they can't sleep? No. Actually, I had people come to me and say, oh, this is kind of nice. I can doze. No. So I didn't know. So here's what I'm saying. There are times when if Audrey and I go to an event, or if you go to an event and you're talking with your spouse about it, you say, hey, I didn't see, was so-and-so here? Oh, yeah, I saw them. Because not everybody sees everybody, or not everybody mentions everybody. For instance, if my wife comes home from a ladies' event and she tells me what's going on, she doesn't list everybody that was at the ladies' event, the 100 or 150 to 200 ladies that were going to be at some event. She doesn't, she may mention and hone in on just one. Do you get that? So here's what happens in these Gospels. Matthew, Mark, and Luke are called, we mentioned this last week, synoptic Gospels. Optic means to see. Synthesis means to see is one. So when you put this together, these 3, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, virtually see all the same stories from the different writers' perspective. John was written, the latest gospel he written, and he wrote thinking, oh, you guys know this. You know Salome was there. You know Joanna was there. You know Jesus' mother was there. The one I want to talk about is Mary Magdalene. And so he just kind of hones in on that. And what does he say about her? By the way, again, I said to you, John only mentions her by name. But do you remember John chapter 20, verse 2, what I pointed out earlier? They have taken the Lord, and we don't know where they placed him. But it shows her as being the one there. But she's saying there were other people that were there with me. Later on, when she's talking just to Jesus, she says, they've taken my Lord, and I don't know where they placed him. Because now she's just talking to this person and saying, here's what's going on. John 20, verse 1. On the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb early while it was still dark. She saw the stone had been removed from the tomb. This is John 20. Let me take you to Mark 16. Early on the first day of the week, what kind of woman was this? Early on the first day of the week, after he had risen, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he had driven 7 demons. This woman knew what it was like to be demonic. It wasn't just that she acted like everybody else. She was possessed by demons. And when Jesus said, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free, she indeed knew what it meant to be freed. If I go back now to John chapter 20, let me paint the picture for a second. Verses 1 and 2 talk about Mary Magdalene. Remember, she came there, she saw with other women, and they left. She saw the stone had been rolled away, and in verse 3, she ran and told Peter and John. She ran and told them. I don't think their place was right next door to where the tomb was. Would you give me that?
No.
Not going to be that close. So she runs over to them wherever they are. She's probably a little bit exhausted because she's run to tell them about this. They run back, but obviously she's just run the full direction the other way. She's probably a little bit exhausted. Yet she comes back, but Peter and John are back there and they're examining things and looking at things, and they've already concluded. They saw and did what? And believed. They had an encounter that changed their lives. What they saw changed how they believed. They then leave. And Mary gets there and lingers there. And here's where we have it in the text. Then the disciples went home again. Peter and John saw and believed, and then went back home. But Mary stood outside facing the tomb, crying. As she was crying, she stooped to look into the tomb. She saw 2 angels in white sitting there, one at the head and one at the feet, where Jesus' body had been lying. They said to her, "Woman, what? Why are you crying?" I said in the last service, those 2 angels, they're neither male or female in heaven. But if there were, these angels would have been men. Why are you crying? Why are you crying? What's going on? If they're women, what would they have done? Oh, honey. Yeah, you're doing it. Oh, how can they help? Women, why are you crying? Now think about it for a moment. They're angels. Were they asking because they didn't know? Not only were they angels, but if they were angels, they knew about the Son of God. And by the way, where were they sitting? In an empty tomb. Did they not know what had happened at Calvary? Obviously they knew. So they're asking, as it were, this rhetorical question. Question not expecting an answer. So let me drop it on the screen this way and say, the angels ask you a rhetorical question, why are you weeping? They knew Mary had cause only for rejoicing, if she understood the truth. I mean, why are you crying? He said he was going to get back to life. He said he was going to be resurrected from the dead. He's not here because he's resurrected. Why are you crying? Do you not understand? The text goes on. Oh, she says, because they have taken away my Lord, she told them. And I don't know. Now it's I in verse 13. It was we in verse 2. And I don't know where they've put him. Having said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, though she did not know it was Jesus. I'm wondering how many times in my life we say the Lord is omnipresent. He's always everywhere. If he's everywhere, I wonder how many times he's been in my life when I said, where's the Lord? What would happen? And he's right there. And it says, though she did not know it was Jesus. How sad. She has an encounter. Can you imagine having an encounter with the President of the United States or some famous person and you don't even know who they are? Woman, Jesus said to her, why are you crying? Again, here's Jesus standing right there. Why are you crying? You want to see the Lord? Hello, I'm here. Hi, why are you crying? Who are you looking for? Do you suppose this is another rhetorical question? I mean, it's Jesus. He knows, doesn't he? He's God. He knows everything, right? Who are you looking for? Supposing he was the gardener, she replied, Sir, if you've removed him, tell me where you've put him, and I'll take him away. Jesus said, now think about it before you hear it. When somebody calls you on the phone, there's something about our hearing ability in our minds that you know the voice of mom or dad or your brother or your sister. If your mom calls you and says, hey, what you up to? You don't say, who is this? You know that voice. You recognize that voice. Jesus said, now, if I call you could, for those of you who have been around our church any amount of time, I could call you and I could shout your voice or I could whisper your voice and you'd say, oh, that's Pastor. I'd have to pretend I was like that southern guy. Hey, how you doing? And you probably wouldn't know it was me. You'd say, who is this, Goober? But if I said my voice, whether it was a shout, well, if I said your name, whether it was a shout or a whisper, you'd say, oh, Pastor, how you doing? Because you recognize it. So I don't know whether he said, she said, they're taking him away and I don't know where they put him. I don't know if he said, Mary. Come on. Or if he said, Mary. But she recognized him. Turning around, she said to him in Hebrew, by the way, I hate to disappoint all of you who have, for years called him Rabboni here. The Greek word is Rabboni. And what's interesting is the Christian Standard Bible is the only one that translates it letter for letter, literally out of the Greek to Ubuntu. But she was saying, she had an encounter that didn't quit. This is wonderful. This is the Lord. She said, I had 7 demons. And he freed me. And she's going to hug him. Have you ever had a teacher that you've really appreciated? You know, I had, last year was my high school's 50th class reunion. I didn't get back there. I had to do a wedding in Northern California. But I was back. I've been back twice, I think. Once for my 40th and once for my 25th. And I don't remember which one because I'm old. I don't remember which one where there was an English teacher. There was a parade, and the English teacher sang the national anthem of the parade. That English teacher was the one that started me in public speaking. Now, I don't know about you, but I never did very well in English. You know, I had to take Greek before I understood English. And so when I did this speech in English, I can still remember what it was about, and I got an A on it. And I go, wow, I wasn't used to getting A's in English. We were back for that class reunion, and he sang, and I said to my wife, hey, I want to go over. His name was Mr. Bickle, Ron Bickle. I said, I want to go over and say hi to him and tell him I appreciate him. Because sometimes, and Mary was, what did she call him? What did she call Jesus? Teacher. Yeah. She appreciated him. So I want to go, and I went over to tell him. I was going to tell him, you won't believe it, but now I speak every week, and you know, and I was preaching all the time. When I went over, and you know me. If you've been around here, you know me. I got over there, and I got choked up, and I couldn't even say it. You know, here I'm going to tell him, you know, hey, I speak every week, and this is real. I'm religious, and I couldn't even get it out. And I choked up, and my wife is standing there, and I'm thinking, unbelievable. You know, all I am is emotional about this. Because what do we want to do with people that are important to our lives, or teachers that are important? What does she want to do? Teacher. And God, you know, changed her at that moment. He said to her 3 things, 3 commands. Don't cling to me, Jesus told her, for I have not yet ascended to my Father. By the way, the King James Version here, you've used it for years, I've used it, it was been confusing for years. The King James says, don't touch me. But obviously, it was okay to touch him. Later on, what did he say to Thomas? Here, touch me. You can, here, put your hand here, do this. So it was a bad translation at that point. And almost every modern translation said, don't cling, don't cleave to me. You know, because what are you going to do when somebody you love, you thought was dead, shows up? You're going to go, oh my goodness, can't believe you're alive. She wraps her arm around, she says, don't cling to me, for I'm not yet ascended to my Father, but go to my brothers and tell them that I'm ascended to my Father and your Father, to my God and to your God. 3 commands, and what does she do with those commands? Mary went. Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, I've had an encounter. I've seen the Lord. And she wanted everybody to know about it. So you have these 4 encounters, Peter and John, then you have Mary Magdalene, now you have the disciples. And what happens with the disciples? Let me share with you what Kent Hughes says about this. He had written about preaching the word. He says, as far as the disciples could see, it was all over. Jesus was dead, right? They didn't know anything else. They just looked and said, he's gone. The Lord's dead. They had come up against a blank wall. They had not believed it would end like this. And they had not yet grasped the truth of Jesus' prophecies of his resurrection. There was nothing left except a reoccurring sense of utter helplessness and the shame of their denials and assertions. The disciples did not know that they were soon going to experience a greater joy than they'd ever known. John 20 is the story of that joy. So here's the story. In the evening on the first day of the week, his disciples gathered together with the doors locked because of their fear of the Jews. These are grown men, and they've locked the door. And they're going to have an encounter with Jesus because of that empty tomb. Then Jesus came, stood among them, and said to them, "Peace to you." Can I just say this really quickly? I hope you catch this. The doors are locked. He's outside. They're inside. How does he get in? Because he's able to just pass through the walls. I mean, they think they're secure. And he just comes in and says, now, the doors locked because of why? Fear. Fear. And if a person has fear, what do they need? They need peace. When people are fearful, you go to them and you say, your little kids are very fearful, and you say, "Oh, honey, it'll be okay. Settle down." And you just give them that peace. Having said this, he showed them his hands and his side. So the disciples did what? Rejoiced when they saw the Lord. Wow. It's changed. They've had an encounter, and they'll never be the same. But there's one more encounter that he's going to have here. Peter and John, they were disciples. Mary Magdalene, she was transformed. The disciples as a group, except one was missing, and that one was Thomas. And what happens with Thomas? But one of the 12, Thomas, called, King James, you know what the King James says on it? And one of the 12 called Didymus. Didymus. And so our translators translated it for you. What does Didymus mean? Twin. So was he a physical twin? Or can I spiritualize it in this case as well? I think Thomas has a lot of twins in us. You ever doubted like Thomas? You ever wonder why? What's going on? And have those doubts? Yeah. One of the 12 Thomas, called twin, was not with them when Jesus came that Sunday night. So the other disciples kept telling him, "We've seen the Lord." But he said to them, "If I don't see the mark of the nails in his hands, put my finger into the mark of the nails, and put my hand into his side, I will never believe." What is he saying? Do you realize Thomas is saying, seeing is believing? Where do you think we got that kind of statement? After 8 days, his disciples were indoors again, and Thomas was with them. Even though the doors were locked, 8 days later, they knew Jesus is alive. They knew that the tomb was empty. They knew Mary had been transformed. They knew Peter and John. 8 days later, his disciples were indoors again, and Thomas was with them. Even though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace to you." Then he said to Thomas, you see, he's never afraid of your doubts. It's not like Jesus is going to run from your doubts and say, "Oh man, I don't know how I'm going to answer them." So he says to Thomas, put your finger here and observe my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Don't be an unbeliever, but a believer. Thomas responded to him, "Oh, my Lord and my God." Jesus said, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Those who believe without seeing are blessed." And guess who he's talking about? He's talking about you and me. You haven't literally, physically seen Jesus, but you see the transformation in the lives of the disciples. You've seen what's going on in the world of the church. The question I have for you today is this: have you had an encounter with the living Lord? They all had encounters, and it changed them. The question I have is, are you here today for the first time saying, "Oh, that's what Easter's about, huh? The resurrection. Jesus said he's alive and he wants to come and live in you, and the only way he can get in you is if you receive him. If you call, whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. It's with the mouth that confession is made unto salvation, and with the heart you believe. If you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God has raised him from the dead, that's the resurrection, you'll be saved. Let's pray, shall we? Oh, Father, today I pray that you would arrest the attention of every person here. I pray that if there is one here without you, that today they could sense, they could encounter you. They would invite you to come and live in them, within them. And that they would know once you've come to live in them, you'll never leave them and you'll never forsake them. While your heads are bowed, while your eyes are closed, if you are here having never trusted Christ, having never invited him into your life to live, to stay, can I challenge you today to do that? You could pray a simple prayer, something like this. Lord Jesus, I'm a sinner. Thank you for dying for me. And today I know you're alive. There was a resurrection. And because you're alive, I ask you to come and live in me today. Save me. Change me. In Christ's name. Amen.